Hello again, you sick, twisted weather freaks, and welcome to another fun-filled, action-packed, and intellectually stimulating edition of This Week in Weather. I'm your host and meteorologist DT from Weather Risk, your commander of chaos, your captain of confusion, your colonel of catastrophe. Let's talk about this week in weather, and we have a pattern change underway. A lot of weather to talk about, so let's get right to it. I think some folks who are snow starved in the eastern U.S. might actually feel, well, a little more optimistic. So let's take a look. See. Now, this here was the overall pattern on February 27th, and you can see, with the big trough here on the west coast, this is the same pattern we've had since mid-November. Massive trough on the west coast, ejecting low pressure areas, and when you have a deep trough on the west coast, you get a ridge in the southeastern states. So the low pressure areas, as you can see, travel from California, Nevada up towards the Great Lakes, which is good for the Rockies. It's good for the West Coast mountains. It's good for the Pacific Northwest, Upper Plains, and maybe even the Great Lakes. But for everybody else, it's a terrible winter pattern, and it's been that way since November. I thought I'd also point out something about the La Nina here. The latest conditions, you can see that it's actually, fallen. It's now dead. All these conditions show that technically the La Nina is now dead. If you look at these values, it's all below zero point 0.5 or above zero point 0.5. So we're now in neutral conditions here in all the areas. Now, obviously, it's still going to take a while for that to show up in the atmosphere, but it is dead. It is weakening. And you can see here that, the CFS, this is the Tuesday run, you can see that all the members show, El Nino by July, really, when you think about it. Most of them. And you can see the dashed black line, that's the mean. So a lot of the members are showing weak El Nino by July and maybe even moderate by the middle of by late summer, early autumn. The Australians are even more bullish. Look at the Australian prediction. Holy cow. Now you can see where La Nina is here. El Nino is here in the pink, right? Oops. And you can see the green line goes above it and by May or June. And they have moderate by July and August. So that's something to watch out for the hurricane season. All right. Let me show you what I'm talking about here with the winter pattern and understanding the Maddie and Julian oscillation, the MJO. I've talked about this before many times. So let's go back to the Buffalo Blizzard here. Now, why is the Buffalo Blizzard the key to understanding the winter weather pattern of 2022-23? Now, there are the headlines. We all saw it. I just want to remind you what it was. Now, let's take a look at the upper air pattern. Now, at one point, it looked like the Buffalo Blizzard was going to usher in the beginning of a serious winter into a good portion, at least January. This was the upper air pattern, and you can see it's extremely ominous and scary looking. This is the Buffalo Blizzard here. And as you can see, there's the upper level low. It's a gigantic closed upper low that dove down from western Canada into the Great Lakes area. The red line there shows the negative tilt. You see how it's tilted northwest to southeast? You see what it's doing there? There's the tilt, right? Now we have a ridge on the west coast that looked like it was going to be building and replacing the trough on the west coast. And then up by Greenland, we had a massive Greenland block. It got a lot of attention. It was well predicted by the weather models, and it was going to last for a couple of weeks. So after the Buffalo Blizzard comes through, the pattern is going to get sustainably cold and stormy for the eastern half of the country. Now this is the day, this is December 25, Christmas Day. You can see the block up there on the top of the image. There's your closed upper low. That was this system here in the Michigan, the Great Lakes, has now moved up into Quebec, Canada. There's a monster trough on the east coast, pulling in the bitterly cold air. A strong ridge on the western Canada, pulling down the cold air, allowing it to go from Alaska and northwest Canada, Manitoba, right into the Midwest. And it looked a very impressively cold pattern. Okay, so that's what we thought was going to happen. Now, the models at this point were showing it. This is here from January 1st. You can see how they were developing this big ridge on the west coast in Canada, a split pattern here, a big trough in the eastern United States, nice blocking here in Quebec, Canada. This looked like a fairly cold pattern. Not extreme, but it had a lot of promise to it. But that's not what we saw happening at all. And now the reasons why the models were showing this was because of this image here. So let's take a look at the top one for a second. Let me shrink this bottom one a little bit here. So this is what the models were showing as of, when was this? This was December 31. As you can see, we have the European on the left, the GFS in the middle, and then the CFS on the right. And all of them were taking, you can see the lines moving into phase 8. a lot of them, especially the GFS and the CFS, definitely taking the phase 8 here. Moderately strong phase 8. And the reason why that was important is because in phase 8, in La Nina, this is what the jet stream pattern looks like. You can see a significant trough on the East Coast, stretching from Virginia up into New England and southeastern Canada. And you have a huge amount of blocking in northwest Canada and the Arctic region and in Greenland. So you had a negative Arctic oscillation, a negative NAO or a Greenland block, and a big trough on the East Coast. So this is for December. As you can see, when you have La Nina, this is what phase 8 gets you. So that's what we thought was going to happen. But that's not what happened. That is not what happened. Instead, we got this. This is the actual plot since November through February 15th. So this is about 90 days here. You see this? And as you can look at the plot here, you can see the actual lines. And even though it's supposed to go into phase 8 and phase 1, like the models are showing here, what it actually did was it jumped back into the neutral circle. See that? Let me call up a little mark here so you can see it. There you go. See how it come into the neutral circle here? It was supposed to come out in here in phase 8 and phase 1, but it didn't. It jumped in here. Now, why did it do that? La Nina. That's why. That's what La Nina does. That's why you don't get big storms on the East Coast, winter storms, when you have La Nina. That's the correlation. It won't let it go into phase 8 or phase 1. It fights it very, very strongly. Notice over the last 90 days, we've been in phase 7 and phase 6 and phase 5 and phase 4 and phase 3 and phase 2. It will not go into these two phases, which are the stormy phases in the winter months for the East Coast. That's one of the problems with it, okay? All right. And because it didn't do that, because we did not get into phase 8 and phase 1, this pattern broke down. And instead, we ended up with this. Now, this image is December 27th. You can already see the Pacific trough, Pacific jet crashing back into the west coast of North America. Okay? Knocking down the ridge, cutting off the supply of cold air. And now, this is by December 28th. By December 28th, look at this pattern. It's gone. The upper low has now pushed up into Greenland. It has completely destroyed the Greenland block. The Greenland block, which is supposed to last until the middle of January, is now gone by January 1st, the beginning of the new year. And we have a monster trough on the west coast and a ridge on the east coast, and we're blowtorching. Everybody in January and February falls into the crapper. That's what this happened. So this movement here, the MJO, was really, really significant. All right. Now let's look at what it's doing right now. Okay, this is current MJO. It's now in the neutral circle. Now this is as of February 27th. The new one for February 20th, March 1 has it here. It's about to move into phase 7, but still into the neutral circle. Now, over the next 10 days, the MJO, as you can see here, bring this forward. You can bring it up. Is going to go into phase 7. Here's the GFS, and there's the European. You see that? It's going to go into phase 7. See the red line? Okay, that we know. Now that takes us to March 6th or 7th. After that, it goes to the blue line, which is phase 8. Now the thing is, when you're reading the MJO, when it's close to the neutral circle, it's very weak. And when it's close to the edge here, the bottom edges, that's when it's very strong. So as you can see, this phase 8 is very strong, way out here. And same thing on the European. Look how strong it is at the top of the scale on March 8th, 9th, and 10th. Incredibly strong MJO. Now, why is this happening? It's happening because the La Nina is dead. That's why it's happening. La Nina cannot drive it back anymore. Because La Nina is gone, it can't drive the MJO back into the neutral circle. See how it works? Now the La Nina is dying, suddenly the MJO can do all sorts of funny things. Yay! Okay, so it goes into phase 8, and now off to the races. This is phase 7, which is, okay, the next several days. Big ridge in the southeastern states, and the low pressure track is going to run from Texas, Oklahoma to Wisconsin, Illinois, or from Arkansas to Ohio, or something like that. You can see the ridge there. It's going to do that. Now, I saw this several days ago. That's why I put this out on the Facebook page and on the Twitter page. This image up here. Okay? And let me take this one away so you can't see it. That's why I called it bullshit. Because this is wrong. Even though the GFS was going bonkers with it, this is wrong. You cannot get a low like this when you have an MJO going into phase 7. Not in neutral conditions. Or even weak La Nina. It is too far. It was too far east by far. Okay. So that's how I knew this was going to be BS. I put this out on February 23rd or 24th, and so far I'm exactly right. So again, the point here is that when the MJO is strong, follow the MJO first and the model second. Now that only applies when the MJO is particularly strong like it is now. Okay, when it's weak like that, it's a different story. But okay, so lesson learned. So here's the next 7 days. Here's the piece of energy coming out of the west coast trough. There it is in Texas. It goes negatively tilted. You can see the tilt right here. You see how it's aligned right here? They call up a marker again so you can see it. Okay, see how it's right here negatively tilted northwest to southeast. So the low is going to explode as it tracks off from Arkansas. That's exactly what happens here. And the winds, look at the winds here. This is why the severe weather threat is so high. These winds here, if you look at the dark red area, this is 90 to 100 knots at 700 millibars. That's 10,000 feet. This means if you get thunderstorms and they start spinning, I mean, the amount of energy in this thing and the downbursts and the high winds, never mind the tornado potential, is really quite strong. And that's why we can see as it develops here, this is from this morning, from this Wednesday morning, the Storm Prediction Center has a moderate risk out for severe weather and a really high percentage of tornadoes as well. Here's the system. It's going to explode. You can see these howling winds here in the warm sector. And when it takes off, look where it goes. It drives the warm air north to Chicago. So Chicago's going to have snow going to rain, if that's correct. Are you kidding me? Chicago is going to have snow going to rain. Look how far west this thing is. Phase 7 works all the time. There it is, phase 7 going right over the ridge. Again, it's amazing how the MJO just works out that way. Now, once it gets up into Ohio, it's going to jump to the coast, okay? And you're going to see significant heavy snow in the eastern Great Lakes, central and northern New York State, central and northern New England. Snow amounts will be 6 to 10, 12 inches. The models are really going bonkers. I've seen some areas in central Massachusetts getting 12 to 17 inches, up to Albany and Syracuse, into southern Vermont, New Hampshire. Now, the coastal areas of New England are probably, and that also means New York City, they're probably going to go a period of snow going over to rain or a mixture. Now, it may go back to snow in southern New England once the low moves away from the coast. So there could be a second round of accumulation in southern Connecticut, southern Rhode Island, maybe even eastern Long Island. But the big snows are going to be just inland, let's say from the Connecticut-Massachusetts border northward. So it's going to be a pretty big event in that regard for those guys. All right, now what happens after this? Okay, this is week 2. The extended models here are doing the same thing, but here, notice, this takes us to March 30th. You see the top of these things? I'll call my marker again, you can see it. March 30th. So this means that the MJO is going to be in phase 8 for most of the month. See that? Most of the month on these models. That's really big. This is the first time in more than 5 months, the MJO has been in phase 8. Now, why is that important? Because in March, in phase 8, in neutral conditions, you get this monster pattern at trough on the East Coast. A strong block in Greenland, negative Arctic oscillation, negative NAO, monster block in the eastern United States. So this is a big deal. This is a snowstorm signal for March. That's what this is. If this is right, the MJO is going, yeah, there's going to be something. Now, okay, and you can see the difference. I brought this up again. Look at the difference between this and this. This is actual, and this is the forecast. Now, assuming this works out to be correct, okay, and I think it is this time because La Nina is dead, we're off to the races. All right, so what happens now? To get to day 6 and 7, okay, the big low on March 3rd or 4th, this low here, goes off the New England coast and becomes a gigantic low. Call my marker again, you can see it. Here it is. This is the Ohio Valley low, the Great Lakes low. It moves into here by March 4 or 5. It's now off the southeast coast of Canada, and it's still there. Here's the blocking pattern. See the monster block? So now you have a Rex block here. This upper low is right underneath the Greenland block. Okay? That's a Rex block right here. Really, really nice to see. Now, the west coast trough is still there. But notice, look what's happening. It looks like it's moving east, and it is, because this ridge is meeting this block. This is called linkage or a ridge bridge right here. And we can see that happening later on. Okay. The temperatures, well, it's going to be some cooling afterwards, but as the blocking pattern begins to come in, we start turning a little colder here. no doubt about it. And then finally, as we get into towards the end of week two, this is now March 9th and then March 14th. So call my marker again. Okay, so now look what happens. These two features have met. So when we saw it here, remember we talked about how this ridge and the block were going to meet. Well, by the time we get now to March 9th or 10th, they have met. This is now one gargantuan block. And that forces the trough here to come east. Yay! It's finally leaving the west coast. It moves into the Rockies, but more importantly, with the huge ocean low still in eastern Canada, the ridge is gone. You see that? The southeast ridge. Bye-bye. Good riddance. Don't come back. Okay? And now by the time we get to March 14th, we have a classic winter pattern, a low broad trough here. Sure, you're getting some Pacific energy here, but you also have a lot of cold air. The polar vortexes come south a little bit, and you can see a nice big trough here and setting the stage for a winter storm. And if we look at the maps, this is the operational European, you can see here, oops, let me get rid of that text. That's not right. That's from the map. And you can see here that we have the gargantuan high. Again, look at this, 1057 millibars. Now, why is this Arctic high so strong? The Arctic high is so strong because of this block right here, because of that block right there. That block causes the high to go crazy. So you have a 1057 millibar Arctic high. Wow. I mean, I haven't seen one of those in forever. And now the cold front goes all the way down to the Gulf Coast. You have some moderate snow here in the Central Plains, right? But notice the isobars. You see the lines here? It's just driving the cold air from Labrador all the way into the East Coast. You see that? Okay, and same thing here. Here's the high 1050 millibars. Look at the northeast winds coming from Labrador, Canada, Quebec, straight down into Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New England, just driving it in here. Now you get this monster low forming. Heavy snow in Texas, in Dallas, yeah, Arkansas, and then what happens to this low? Does it do this or does it come up the coast? Hard to say. I don't know yet. But if we look at the operational control run of the European, this is the control run beyond day 10. This is 252 hours. Again, so this is the control run. You can see your control run. That's what the C stands for. Look at the date. Okay, this is the evening of March 11th, March 12th, and you can see there's a 987 low here on the coast. You've got heavy snow almost all over Virginia and West Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee and Northwest Georgia and Alabama. This is a big snowstorm. This looks like, yeah, does it look like March of 1993? A little bit. It kind of does. Okay, and then if you look at the control run again, look at this, 980 millibars. Okay, Greensboro maybe. North Carolina. Now it's gone. The snow's gone over the rain as far north as Washington D.C. and Richmond and maybe even Charlottesville. But the interior Ohio Valley is getting crushed. The Appalachian Shenandoah Valley getting crushed. Heavy rain and mild temperatures up and down the East Coast into New Jersey. It's snowing in New York City and Atlantic City, but if this is right, it's going to go over the rain. And then you can see there it is, wraps up. The low jumps off the coast. Maybe it stays snow in New York City. I don't know. Definitely New England gets bombed. Pennsylvania and New York. Western Maryland, you all get bombed on that. Now, is this right? No. This is just a possibility of what could happen. I don't know if it's going to be this far inland off the coast. There's something coming. There is something coming in this kind of weather pattern. This is something. Something's coming. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Phase 8. You don't want to go against it. I'm telling you. You really don't. And again, this is why. Phase 8. Okay, classic Maddie and Julian oscillation phase 8 pattern, and this might last into early April. Might end by the third week of March. I don't know, but it's going to last at least 2 weeks, I think. Okay, and then you can see how the cold coming down. Look at the temperature anomalies here. This is for the plains of the Midwest. This is coming east in week 2. You can see that as well. So it's very impressive. All right. So in summary, there's a pattern change which is underway. We have a huge negative NAO or Greenland block, which as it retrogrades into Quebec and Labrador, it links up with the Alaskan Ridge. Like I mentioned, this is called a ridge bridge. This is very different from the Greenland block at the end of December that did not change the Pacific Jet West Coast trough. This one will because it's linking up. Okay. Now this forces the never die West Coast trough, Eastern Pacific trough, to leave. it finally breaks down and it moves from the eastern Pacific eastward into the Rockies, right? And then towards the plain states, okay? And that causes the southeast ridge to get crushed. But this doesn't happen until after, let me call my marker again. This doesn't happen until after March 6th, okay? So the trough moves east, it crushes the southeast ridge after March 6th. Right? Massive Arctic high feeds the Arctic north winds down from Labrador, driving the cold air southward. How cold? I don't know yet. This is the model projection. I don't know how cold it's going to get. I think if the high gets to 1056 millibars, it's going to be pretty damn cold, but we have to see. And I don't know how far south the cold air is going to go. Interstate 70, Interstate 40, Interstate 20, I don't know. I'll have to wait and see. Yeah, March 11th to 12th, 1993, 1888. There's a lot of storms happening around this date. Okay, and like I said, very stormy March past the 15th, I think. And remember, when the MJO is very strong, it rules. This is the lesson here to learn. When the MJO is very strong, it rules. All right, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed it. This is meteorologist DT from Weather Risk. I'll see you over on the Twitter page, over on the website, and over on the Facebook page.